Frank Clark was a Navy veteran and a Troy University alumnus, and at the time of his passing in August of 2024, just short of his 101st birthday, he was the oldest veteran alumnus of Troy University. Clark sat down with us in early August of 2024 to tell stories about his time in the military and his long relationship with Troy. Here is Frank Clark in his own words.
One of the great pleasures of my life was meeting Frank and Cupidine Clark. And that introduction occurred in 1974 while I was visiting Enterprise State Junior College. At the time, I was at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and we were forming a consortium with all the state's two-year colleges. I went, and President Forrester, the president of Enterprise State, and I were speaking, and I told him we needed to appoint a coordinator for that junior college linkage program that would allow students to attend a two-year college for 1 year and then come to UAB for a health training program the second year. President Forrester looked at me and he said, "I have just the right man." And he was right. Frank Clark. Frank Clark was a Navy veteran and a former corpsman who worked with the United States Marine Corps during World War II. And so he was a member of the greatest generation. Dr. Forrester and I walked down the hall. He introduced me to Frank, and from that point forward, we shared what was to become a lifelong friendship. An immediate bond occurred because Frank was as much Marine as he was corpsman, because corpsmen are valued by Marines, particularly during a time of war. As the years passed, I continued to visit the Wiregrass, and every time I went, even close to Coffee County, I would stay with the Clarks. In fact, they kept one room at their house and they named it, "This is Jack's room." I spent a great deal of time with them over the years, and my time spent with them literally intensified in 1989 when my family and I moved to Troy and Troy University. Frank had 2 degrees from Troy University, at that time known as Troy State. He was very proud of that fact. Frank was a family man, he was a leader, and he was a patriot. I think the value of relationships, as I see them, is best seen in my friendship with Frank and Cupidine Clark. I love them. There was a magnetic effect that occurred with everyone who knew both of them. Frank unfortunately passed away August the 17th, 2024, at the young age of 100. His death followed Cupidine's by about 6 months because Cupidine had passed in February of 2024. The video you're about to see captures Frank and Cupidine and was conducted 1 week. This particular interview was conducted 1 week before Frank passed away. The video reflects Frank's insight, his leadership, his love of family that he demonstrated throughout his century of life. This video is dedicated to Frank and Cupidine and their 2 sons, 2 remarkable young men, as I knew them back then, Frank Jr. and Stephen Clark.
In May of 1941, I joined the Navy. I was 17 years old, but they let me in because I was going to be 18 in September. I was in when World War II started. A couple of months later, I was on a ship, the USS Zigzag Island. They call it that. And we went into the South Pacific first went into American Samoa, and later went over, and a Marine told me that I was in the 2nd Marine Division, but another Marine said I was in the 8th Marine Division in British Samoa. So I don't know where I was. But I jumped from island to island to island, and I must have been on 20 islands. I'm told that there's over 10,000 islands in the South Pacific, but I must have hit a lot of them. I don't really know. Because after a while, it all becomes a blur to you. They sent me to medical school. Primarily, I did first aid work with the Marines. The Marine Corps does not have a medical section. The Navy furnishes the Marine Corps with their medical. So it seemed like to me that they always shipped me in with a bunch of Marines. Oh, I went out with a mobile hospital. We supposed to build this hospital, set up these Quonset huts, and I'd never heard, or none of my crew had ever heard of Quonset hut. We got them about half built, and they moved it. I don't know where it went to or what happened to it, but they split us up again into different Marine groups. About 20 of my friends went with the 1st Marine Division into Guadalcanal. Thank God I didn't go, because every one of those guys were either killed or wounded at Guadalcanal. I didn't go. I was lucky. It's just a matter of who went where. I had a strange thing happen to me one day after I retired. I was over at Enterprise State Junior College, and this guy came in. He said, "Hey, Doc Clark, you don't know me, do you?" I said, "No, I don't, but tell me." And he pulled up his pants leg, and he had a scar along there. He said, you sewed that up." He said, "You were real busy that day." He said, "But I remember you." I thought that was an interesting incident that happened. And then again, sometime later, I had another Marine came to see me, and he said that I had worked on him. He didn't say where. He did, one of them said the Marianas, but I don't even know where the Marianas are. A lot of what you do in these incidents are blind. You don't know where you are or what you're doing. You never know where you are. I'm sure somebody knows what island it is or what, but we never knew some number. And we were flying blind. We were stationed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, twice. And that was an interesting place. I was Chief Master at Arms of the Naval Hospital at Guantanamo Bay. And one night they called me up there. They had these 3 fellas. They had a sack full of guns. They gave me the gun, and the commanding officer asked, "Have you been cleared for top secret?" I said, "No, sir. Secret, but not top secret." He said, "Call down to headquarters and clear Clark for top secret." And that's all there was to it. And they gave me a bag of guns. And these were fellas who were on ships that had started in the Bay of Pigs. The Bay of Pigs fiasco that the Kennedys started, I think. And we had those people for 2 or 3 days, and I would carry their food to them. I put the guns in my locker in my office, locked them up. And then one night they all disappeared. My gun disappeared. They got me to give them to them, and they loaded them in some type of a vehicle and flew them out that night. But that was my connection to the Bay of Pigs that I learned a lot about later, but not at the time. It was interesting later. Yeah, I asked to be transferred to Pensacola. That was the closest place to my home. And I was, and that's where I retired from the Navy, September the 10th, 1965. I retired. Well, when I retired, I took a year, played golf. And then I decided I was going to school at Troy. Took the ACT, made the score, went to Troy, put down my $10, got admitted. Then I heard about Enterprise State Junior College. So I come down there, and they had a lot of pre-courses that I desperately needed. I hadn't been in an academic course for 25 years. So I decided to go there and take free English and free math and so forth. So I went to Enterprise State 2 years. Then I went to Troy and got my bachelor's degree and started the next week on my master's. And I got a job. I taught high school 1 year, and I went to school at night. Troy had branches at Fort Rucker that you could go to at night. So that was close, and I started going night school. And I eventually got my bachelor and my master's from Troy. The president of Enterprise State called me one day, and he wanted to know if I was interested in working for them, and I was. I was impressed with Enterprise State. And he said, "Well, when will you have your master's?" And I said, "Well," he said, "could you have it by next September to teach in a junior college, you got to be in the faculty, you have to have a master's degree. Will you have it by next September? And I said, yes, sir, I believe I can. I went to school at night and in the summer, 2 summers, and I got my master's degree from Troy and came back and worked at Enterprise State Junior College for 18 years on the faculty, mostly as a guidance counselor. I met Jack. Jack came down. He was working in Birmingham for UAB, and he made a circuit of all the junior colleges. And one weekend he came by, we got talking, we liked each other. I had just built a new home there in Enterprise, had a guest bedroom off the garage. And one Friday, he wasn't married then. And I asked him to spend the weekend, and he did. After that, he made his circle about almost every other week. He would come by and spend the weekend with us. And he must have spent 10 or 15 weekends with us. I was building a house on a lake outside of town, and he helped me work on it. He helped me do a lot of things, and we got to be real close friends, and we've been close friends ever since then. One time, let me tell you, there was on the board at Troy, this fellow called me and asked me if I knew Jack Hawkins. I said, yes, sir, I knew. He said, we are considering him for president of Troy University. I said, well, you'd be real lucky to get him, because I understand that there's a school in Washington, D.C., that's interested in him, and we don't need to lose these bright young men. And Jack is very articulate. As you know, you've talked to him. He's a writer. He has helped write a book and writing another. And he's extremely smart. He said, I like him too. What can I tell you about somebody who is your soul? I met her when she was 18. I married her when she was 20. And we were together for some record number of years. We stayed together. She was always backing me up. And when you have a wife who will back you up, you are going someplace if they want you there. And she always pushed me. And I loved her with my heart and soul. And her death tore me apart, just tore me up. I'm still not over it. She died the 22nd of February this year. And I still suffer every day. And I sit down in there and look at her picture. But If a man's got a good wife, he's ahead of the game. I believe that. We had Frank and Steve. You couldn't have two better boys. That the two boys, each one of them had a daughter, and each daughter had two children. So we had 4 grandchildren. We had 4 great-grandchildren. So we were blessed.
It was President Reagan who, I think, said it best when he said the greatest privilege on earth is to be born an American citizen. For where else can people, regardless of race, sex, or handicapping condition, aspire to become all that they have the potential to be? Frank Clark lived by those words. He loved America, but he also knew that freedom is not free. Frank was a patriot who loved his country and his family. I am very proud to have called Frank a Trojan, and even more importantly, one of my dearest friends. May God bless Frank and Cupidine, their sons, and their entire family. Semper Fidelis, Frank.